Hi, this is Menopause Woman, explained so that you don't have to be feeling uncomfortable. So, menopause affects to all people. It's just a question of when. It affects to women, it affects to their husband, to their children, and it affects to the relationship. And that's very rarely talked about. And, well, for starters, the hardest thing is that you don't know when it comes, when it hits you. It can be when you're 35, when you're 45, when you're 55, or in very rare cases, it just goes and nobody actually notices approximately anything. But I think that that's quite rare. But it's a sort of thing that people wanted to believe in the past. They wanted to believe, and women wanted to hide it, that this kind of transition is taking place. And, well, it just means basically the word menopause. It means that the lady hormones, estrogen, is starting to fade. We don't have it anymore. We don't have it as much anymore as we used to. And that's why our body changes and it affects our minds and whatnot, many other things. But it's not a big deal in itself. It's like diabetes. You suddenly don't have one hormone enough, so you have to take pills, you have to take a supplements, medication to correct the balance and continue living your normal life. So there isn't anything magical or mystical about it. The only mystery is that the doctors aren't very keen on treating it. But let's get back to the real life issues, if we might say. So, you don't know when it comes, and the hard thing is that women don't want it to come. Women don't want to think that now I'm so old that I cannot have children anymore. Even if you had your children like 20 years before and you don't want them anymore, or you don't want more children anymore. But it's still, it affects self-esteem. It affects your image of yourself. And that's why you trying to avoid the idea. But how it starts, this is one way or one story. Mine started when I was 44 and I suddenly started to sweat. And I started to sweat in certain places like a subway, and then I had a panic attack because of all the changes that were going on right there and then. But it was very odd to my husband. It was very hard for him to understand that suddenly why I am not willing to go on subway, why I'm sweating, why I'm feeling uncomfortable, why I don't want him to touch me. And of course he thought that was wrong, that is our relationship coming to an end? And of course I understand that that is the worry. When your wife or spouse suddenly starts to act differently, they suddenly, for example, don't want you to hold your hand around them because they are sweating half of the time and they are feeling uncomfortable. And they are suddenly in their thoughts, like thinking about things and silent more because they are wondering what this is. Of course, some people think that, oh my God, is this cancer or is this something serious? It's very easy to think that way when you have symptoms that don't add up to anything. And of course, there are, even if you realize what it is about, then many people, even some of my friends, don't want to take medication because they still believe the old study that says that it causes heart attacks and breast cancer and so forth. But I think that we are safe to say that that study was poorly done and doesn't actually tell us anything about hormonal medication. But that's one thing. When you are puzzled, when you are afraid, you act differently. And many women don't feel comfortable in talking about it with their husbands. My husband has been like vetted through these things, so he knows about approximately everything about a woman's life. But it's not so easy for everybody. And of course, there is this kind of stigma that then you are grandma when you have these certain symptoms, and then you know what it means. And that's bollocks. All of it. Because, of course, now we look after ourselves more in general. So why wouldn't we look after ourselves in this situation? This hormonal deficiency that we have. We are not dying from it. It doesn't mean that we have to stop living. It doesn't mean that we have to be grandmas, like the grandmas that our grandmas were. But I understand that it's scary, and it affects on a relationship if you cannot talk about it openly and try to find the solution together openly. So I don't know how to start about the conversation, but you might be able to start that. Can this have something to do with your hormones? I have just heard this kind of theory. And really encourage your wife or your spouse to go to see a gynecologist. Or if you have this kind of special centers, then of course go to that kind of center, because they already know what's going on, or they should know. And I know how devastating it is to go to one doctor and they say that, oh, you're too young, you just have to live through it, and it's not that. Or then they say that it belongs to this age and now you just have to forget your usual self and try to be a grandma full time. But everybody doesn't want to do that, and that's not necessary. Of course, there are different kind of symptoms. The easiest to see is the sweating, the sudden sweating, which is really uncomfortable and really annoying and really unpleasant. But then, of course, there is a lack of sleep that usually comes. So you might find your wife be awake in the middle of the night or roll around in a bed and then be cranky in the morning because they didn't have enough sleep. And when that continues, there will be arguments, and that affects your relationship. And of course, there is the question of intimacy. And with this, I mean the bedroom activities that cannot be said out loud in YouTube without my video going to this meticulous scrutiny and maybe never be published. But it affects on that too. First of all, the effect it has our self-esteem. Your wife doesn't feel the woman that she usually is or that she has been. She feels that she's something else, something less, that she's not a full woman anymore. And that's quite much. You are not so open to different things when you feel like that. But of course, you can try to correct that by being more considerate. And of course, there are physical changes. And so the lack of intimacy just may be because they feel numb. And if you don't feel anything, you actually are numb, then you don't enjoy very much of intimacy. But there is a hormonal medication to that too. And I really encourage people to use it because it makes all the difference. And it doesn't cause cancer. Not according to this knowledge that we have now. There are this kind of topical treatments that are really light but make all the difference. And that affects relationship to the point where there is no intimacy like there used to be, or there isn't that kind of pleasure of it, then men think that there is something wrong with them. So you might feel that your wife doesn't love you anymore, doesn't find you attractive anymore, that kind of things. And that's quite serious. But I think that both men and women should try to understand this, that if this kind of a very basic thing in relationships suddenly changes, it affects to both of you. So the woman feels less of a woman, and the husband feels that they are not attractive anymore. They are not the same persons that they were. But that can be corrected through medication, and you should be able to talk about it openly. And of course there are many kind of these kind of jokes about women getting old, and avoid those jokes. Those are they really hurt when you are in that process, and try to figure out how to handle it and try to feel good about yourself. So menopause affects your life and your wife's life in many ways, but it's nothing to be scared of. It comes if you are fortunate enough to live long enough, and if you are fortunate enough to be married to a same woman long enough. It doesn't have to mean that your life ends as a couple. It doesn't have to mean that intimacy ends. You just, or it would be best. It would be the best scenario to tackle this together, to talk about it and to accept it as a part of life, and well, see beyond these first things. See beyond this shame, this kind of losing your self-esteem, losing your face when sweating in a public place. It's much more. And of course there is the more serious things. I can tell you that my family has a history of heart diseases. And even though I don't have extra weight, I am in the zone that I am likely to have a heart attack if I don't really take care of myself. And one part of that is the estrogen. So it has been studied that taking estrogen prevents me, or prevents the fact that I would have a heart disease or heart attack later on. And that's a kind of big thing, as well as bone density and that kind of things. So it's much more than just sweating and laughing about old ladies who sweat. It's about your basic health and your life expand and life expectancy. So sit down and try to talk about it. And please believe that when these symptoms come and when these things happen, they might not, but to your intimate moments, it's not you. It's not your fault. Even if your wife would be angry to you because they are angry to the whole world, it's not your fault. And there is something that you can do. There is many things that you can help. You can talk, you can offer a shoulder to be in this together. And believe, and let your wife believe, that you will have much ahead of you. You will have long life together and a happy life, and it doesn't have to end, and no part of it has to end to menopause. It's just a phase. It's just hormonal deficiency, nothing more. I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Goodbye.